So today we're going to talk about shelters. So if you're out on a day hike or you're out doing a natural backpacking trip and the weather kind of catches you askew, there's a few shelters you can make real fast out of simple things like string, tarp, or poncho, or trekking poles. So we're going to demonstrate a couple of those today. So the first thing we're going to do is an Adirondack style shelter. It's just made with a tarp. I'm going to probably use some branches for tent pegs and some paracord. So first off, we're going to do is we're going to find a spot. Happen to have a nice spot here in between two trees in my backyard. So we're going to tie a guy line right across here, just a bit above the sitting height, and that's going to be the peak of our shelter. It's a real easy shelter to do, and anybody can do it. You don't need to know any fancy knots. You just need to know how to tie an overhand knot. So first we're going to do is flatten out the ground so we can create a nice base. We're going to stick these aside. One of the reasons I wore snowshoes is because snowshoes are just easier and faster than you can do with your feet, and it'll be more level and even. Now, if you don't have snowshoes, you just got to go over it a bunch of times with your feet. But if you do have snowshoes or even cross-country skis, then you can make a nice platform that you can then take off your snowshoes and stand on, because you've already got back to the snow. If the snow's really deep, you're going to go down. You're going to get cold, and you're going to get wet, bad things happen. Alright, so we've done that. So the next thing we're going to do is tie our guy line. Use any kind of string you want for that. Today we're going to use paracord, once I find it. Paracord is parachute cord, is what it originally was developed for. You see it in every bushcraft video there is on the internet. It's strong. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you can reuse it, which is why most people try to reuse as much as they can. So I'm going to try not to cut this today. It's already cut. So we're just going to secure one end here. Using a round turn and 2 half hitches. This piece it cinches up nicely and it's fairly easy to take apart. And we're going to go across. On this side, I can try to get it as tight as you can. A little bit of a twang. And we're going to do a close hitch. Yes, this would be easier if I cut it, but I don't want it. Yes, I have a knife on it. The whole purpose of a shelter like this is just to keep the wind off of you, retain a little bit of body heat, and give you some kind of protection from the elements, or reflect heat back into you if you have a fire. In the summer this is easier, in the winter your tarp freezes and it's a little harder. Now what I tend to do is I tend to keep it to the first set of grommets, in. That way I can thread my line through it if I want, and use toggles and a prusset knot if I really want to. But if I'm doing this fast, I'm just going to put it over top. I'm going to guy it out. Try to get that as straight as possible. Now I am going to cut my rope because I need to do a guy line of some kind. Got one right here. For this, we're going to use the trekking poles to guy it out. It's long enough. Now I'm just going to bring it out to here. Step on my trekking pole, bury it a little bit. My trekking poles aren't the most sturdy things in the world. So what you really should do is have this go out farther and stake the other end before you do it. Stake out the back a little bit. All right, so we did our guy line right across the top. We've guided out at the front using our trekking poles, and then snow staked it to the ground. Snow staking is where you take a stick or a tent peg, put it sideways, bury it in the snow, then pack it down tight. It'll hold better than a regular tent peg, or if you just put a stick in the ground, because that'll pull out. You're using the snow to freeze it in, and it gives you more surface area to hold it. The snow today is very fluffy, so this took a lot more tries, and it will probably fall down, unfortunately, because I don't have any tent pegs with me today. But the shelter isn't too bad. Along the back, we didn't peg it out. What we ended up doing is burying the back half in snow. That'll prevent any wind from coming in the back, and keep it from moving around, because the longer it sits like that, the more it's going to freeze and the more it's going to stay solid. But now you have something to put your sleeping mat under, or at least get yourself out of the shelter of the snow or the wind. And it's just big enough you could do it just tall enough that it's going to stop any rain or anything in. You don't want it too tall unless you're using a fire. Then you want it some way to get the fire in, so you guide out higher. So I would adjust my trekking poles to make it taller, but I'm not right now because they're where they are right now. So that's an easy little shelter to make. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need to know any big knots or anything like that. Hopefully this was informative. And next we're going to do a poncho shelter, which should be a little bit easier, but with my trekking poles it might not work, so we'll see. Okay, so now we're going to do a trekking pole shelter just with a poncho. This is just something to sort of get out of the rain. It's probably not big enough for you to sleep under, but you're looking for something to get you out of the sun. The sun can be an issue in the winter. Get some gloves on to do this because I got to bury these. All right, so we're only in about 1.5 inches of snow. I don't really need the snowshoes, but they were more of a literary device than anything else. All right, so we're going to do a trekking pole shelter with a poncho. So get our trekking poles in. Now instead of guying to the ground, I'm going to guy to the trees because there's not enough snow really to guide the ground. But what I'm going to have to do is mound around each pole so it actually stays upright. So this is just a cheap poncho. I got it from work from a supplier. get these at Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, Lowe's, Rona, Home Depot, Walmart. You just can't use the real cheap ones from the dollar store. You might find these at the dollar store. So what we're going to do is unsnap the sides. And now it just makes a very lightweight tarp. So what we're going to do is string line across the poles. It's going to be across the trees. I'm going to go around the poles just because. The poles won't hold anything right now. It's not in the snow. But a poncho is something that I always recommend carrying in a day hike because you never know when the weather's going to go bad. You never know when you have to do this. And this would also work for that tarp shelter I just tried to make. That there's going to be about 30 minutes of outtakes on. You can do the same kind of thing as you would do with the tarp shelter, or with the poncho. What I usually tend to do is just make an A-frame. Because this is just something to sit under to shelter a storm. This is not a permanent shelter, a long-term shelter. This is not something you're going to need to sleep under unless things get really bad. If things get really bad, and it is, you're going to try to do this as lengthwise as you can. And try to make it as much of like an Adirondack shelter as you can. Actually, we'll do that. Now, ponchos don't have grommets on them. Or at least my poncho doesn't have grommets on them. You can get ones with a grommet. And those will make life a lot easier. So what we're going to have to do is bunch of this up and tie a knot around it. The easy way to do that is to take a stone or a pebble, put it in, and then wrap around. I'm going to use a small piece of wood instead of stone. I'm going to put it in and just pinch it. And I'm just going to tie a knot around it a couple times. And if you've ever torn a grommet on a tarp, this is a good way to do it too. Doesn't have to be a big stick, it's just got to be a little piece. So, now it's about the size of a toothpick, this is. And it just makes a toggle and a bite for you to put some rope around. It's not pretty. It's really not. But if it's raining, I'm kind of out of the rain. It's going to hold on to some heat for me, which is pretty much all you need it to do. In the winter, it's basically heat retention to keep a little bit of extra snow off of you. As long as it stays up and it's steep enough to shed a snow load, that's fine. Put a heat reflector in front of you in a fire. This will be fairly cozy or catch enough of the heat that you wouldn't freeze to death at night. This is an emergency shelter, so it's not meant for long term. This is actually big enough for me to lie down in if I really wanted to, but it's mostly just to sit in like this and just keep myself out of the rain or out of some of the elements. Alright, hope this was informative, and remember to like and subscribe.